Hello.
Hello.
So, today's episode, estimates are great. You should always estimate everything. So
Yeah,
very
of
high
course. And
level
then
of
put
detail.
it into Jira, and then let's go.
Put it into Jira, yes. Discuss it with everybody. Make sure the
Over
estimates
and
are always...
it is all about the discussion, not about the doing.
Yes, always keep them always up to date. Everything needs to be estimated. Please don't make any decisions if you have tasks that are not estimated. Check
And don't start with the work, otherwise you won't be in time, right?
No. You can't start with the work. You need to estimate even things that are happening after you're done with your work, right? So just to keep your options open. And you need to discuss them with everybody, gather feedback on the estimates, maybe invite people to challenge you on your estimates if there's disagreement.
Exactly. That's the first part of the discussion today, and the second is how to blame others for being late in a good way.
And keep doing this until you're old, rich, and have billions of users.
Oh, so I need to still do it. Oh,
or maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong.
Hello. No, I'm just streaming from today from home today. Hello, Jan asked. My background is more in the color of your background right now. It's very blurry. Anyway, so it's a fallback thing.
It might be the background blur that might be applying on you as well.
Yeah. Anyway, it's not a big topic today, right? It's like
okay, yeah. So what about what I said in the intro? Where did the problem start? Obviously, what I said is a little bit satirical, and I like the lightheartedness of everybody in the comments for following up onto this episode on LinkedIn. Everybody's sort of joking around about estimating. I like that. So that's that tells me that people have experienced this, that this is not a novel problem. Where should the estimation issue sort of start? If you're estimating at work, you have a software team of 10, you're a scale up, and you need to prioritize your work, and you're doing it, it's going to be complete buffoonery if I tell you to stop doing it, right? Because it is the kind of waste that sort of is necessary in the process that you have. Like if I pull it out, it's keeping something afloat. So how would you start? Where is the first domino for estimation?
The waterfall process, right?
Waterfall process.
Good question.
What do you mean by that? The waterfall process. What is that for you?
The waterfall process for me stands for the traditional engineering world or the traditional process world, where you have the typical production processes and you estimate a process by several factors like what is the average time from last time, so you actually know you know roughly about how much time you will need or how much reserve you need. You know many factors up front because it is a repetitive process. Software development is, when you do it in a waterfall process, that's a big problem. It is not a process. It is more the project. It's more like small projects, small iterations. And the difference between process and project is that the project is something new with a specific, let's say, time frame. So some call that sprints when you take a look into the Scrum idea. In the original Scrum, you have the very same thing with having those iterations, those ideas. What is the smallest step you can do, and do that or treat it as a little project. So you don't exactly know, but you go on. But with waterfall, that was a big approach. Even when I started with the software development in the professional space, people try to plan everything up front, price everything up front, calculate everything up front, and measure you at the end of the project by the initial estimation.
Yeah.
So you, as a software development person who was estimating or planning those kind of big Gantt charts and those kind of nonsense, you were basically held accountable for those estimates in the beginning. So those estimates weren't estimates; those estimates were commitments, and that is one of the big problems. Exactly, that they became contract. That's a good point, and that is what you shouldn't do, in my opinion. You shouldn't basically put those things into contract, because estimates are estimates. So starting point would be to understand this for me, what an estimate actually is, because it's not about, hey, I estimate something and I get blamed when it's not done in time because of that. And estimates can, they probably become better in the long run when you are in the same company doing the same stuff over and over again. You will become better because you have more, insights and more information, more experience. But especially when you start new things, new endeavor, new tech stacks, new people, new teams, then estimates are just roughly for you internally, and they shouldn't be too much for the outside world. It is oftentimes better to say we are pushing towards some goal, and then we have a step-by-step approach where we really communicate where we are, what are the problems, and then people can, with those informations, think for themselves how long it will roughly take to the next milestone, and then think from there. And that makes for me more sense as a step-by-step approach. But yeah, if it's really working or not, it depends, of course.
That's a good point. So when you're saying estimates, you mean time estimates, like time to completion. So you break down work, you assign it to people, you treat people's time like it's inventory, and you try to assign that inventory as diligently as possible. Then you either might decide on a budget, or you determine how it fits on the existing budget, or if you need more, or if you need to cut slack.
I personally think it is still better to not try to estimate something for a budget, because it doesn't really work out if maybe build a homepage for someone.
That's a good point.
You can't do that. It is so small, you can test it. But as soon as you get to the point where you have a project which spans with a team of 5 over 12 to roughly 18 months. So even already saying 12 to 18 months, how do you estimate those 6 months delta in that moment, or reserve or something like that, or buffer? That doesn't make sense to me. So we must make
And we're also not buying something, right?
Exactly.
Right? We usually treat estimates. Let's say if you and I are now part of a dysfunctional process, and we lack the awareness that estimating is dysfunctional, right? Like we would then be decision makers that are hoping to get the conversion of labor cost to time on the calendar right. Like that's sort of what our decision making space is, right? We want to decide what goes on the roadmap, every milestone on the roadmap. The milestone is usually on a calendar point, like on a day on a calendar, or time from today, or time from project start, right? You might even be estimate. So some organizations estimate future projects to see how viable they are, which is a whole different conversation. But if you and I are estimating time to completion within budget, and how to assign resources, how do we get out of this trap? What should we do differently today, if today is an estimation meeting?
Understand
as an engineering manager, let's say, as a tech lead, somebody who has decision-making power.
The estimation is what, so when you do a private project for yourself, the estimation is what you think it will roughly take, that you have a very rough idea.
Personal projects? Do you estimate personal projects?
Yeah, of course. I always estimate to get a feeling for, feedback from myself. So was it actually a good estimate? What I've done wrong? What have I forgot to, take into account? But that's it. So it shouldn't become an accountability for your team in that moment. And that's one of those points. The team should be aware of that. And when you basically then go and start something, it is very important that that's maybe a good start as well. It is like you have this team. Let's say you have a team of 5 developers, and you have some people above, in quotes, that team, right? It's maybe a CEO in smaller companies who negotiated something with a client, and based on the first estimation you have given, you are now in that meeting to provide this first estimation. It is extremely important that this CEO is within that meeting. So this CEO needs to have the understanding what's going on. If the CTO is not capable, pull the CTO. He should be capable of doing that. And this person then needs to negotiate that on the basis what this person was hearing. And not try to get the people to, you need to be as fast as possible. We will take as much, possible we can do for their time to make it most efficient as possible, because this is not a machine. Right? It's not like efficiency in development is not like in a machine in a car, and you don't measure it like that. You even can't measure it because, a machine is always running in the same frequency, while a human or a team isn't, especially there you have circumstances. So it must be clear that that you get a rough feeling what's going on. So for example, when we have developed CloudBar, which was targeted for, I think we thought we would be finished in 9 months. It took 18 months. And because there were so many things happen, so we even postponed the project and all kind of things. And it worked out, but only because, first of all, we used continuous delivery. And we were open in communication, which means that the people who were the stakeholders who basically received the first version were part of those meetings where we discussed those things. And since it was very openly discussed, suddenly those pseudo deadlines weren't existing. The budget was like, okay, I understand that needs a little bit more time or budget. Okay, that's fine, as long as you can show it. We had that similar discussion with the deadline-driven approach and why I dislike that one, or we dislike that one. And that is the very same thing. So if you are open,
like creating an estimate and then like putting it on the calendar.
Exactly. So the only thing which you provoke then is to bring the people to the point that they actually finish something to a specific date, no matter if it's actually finished or not. So they really take a look into the contract, which they shouldn't do. They should, build the right product, not the product based on a contract. And that's a difference to maybe engineering, the traditional
contract will always
machining.
be lagging behind.
So development is a living process. You don't 100% know what you will get, and you need to have that in basically taken into account, right? And I think that's the most. So for me, it would be the most important thing to get all stakeholders inside that meeting, and from then on, have those meetings in a regular order, right?
How regular?
It depends on the context. So I would say 2 to 3 weeks is a good thing for the average. So what is the average, right? It's hard to define, but so if you have the typical one team thing and you have several stakeholders, then make it 2 to 3 weeks, but have asynchronously just push updates out, which means that use continuous delivery and inform that we have done something. Where are the current problems? Do that by typical email, have a Notion page or whatever fits to your environment. That's just for plain communication. Some people I saw making videos. I've done that for a while as well. So it was making a video to explain that in plain English or plain German in that way. So it was basically something a non-tech person, a non-tech stakeholder can understand. What are the challenges right now? And you will see, because of those kind of things, videos are actually great. People will see, they are really into that, and it takes longer. And the biggest fear, and that's estimations, deadline, for of stakeholders is the devs are not doing anything. And when they have this feeling for 3 weeks and then you come and say it takes 1 week longer, they're incompetent.
Yeah.
This won't happen if you are ongoingly with them involved in communication. Then you don't have that problem. It will never happen like this, and that's then the reason, or let's say the basis where you could avoid, let's say, to be pinned down on an estimate. That's my
down. Sorry, recovering from a cold, and my voice is still a little bit weak. I lost my voice yesterday. Like being pinned down on an estimate, I think, is what emotionally most engineers connect estimation to. So it almost feels like I've talked to over hundreds of developers on this, and it is most reminiscent to the process of being pipped. When you have performance improvement processes in like a corporation, where you're not really improving your performance, you're just helping the organization create paperwork on whether or not you're incompetent, so that they can fire you for non-performance reasons, because then it's cheaper and you can sue them, right? So that's what it feels like to like be held at gunpoint to provide an estimate, because oftentimes the advice that I give engineers that reach out for coaching, tech leads, even CTOs, startup CTOs, I tell them just stop giving an estimate. Like if that's how you feel, there's an underlying issue that isn't being discussed. So stop giving an estimate so that you can discuss it, right? Like giving the estimate when you know it's nonsense is avoiding a deeper issue. Like you're not getting to the root cause, and if you keep indulging into it because it's easy, you will never address the root cause, and you will just continuously waste everybody's time essentially, and retain this psychological feeling of we need to make it up until that deadline. After that deadline, we are incompetent, right? And then that continuously lingers on the team, and it's that what kills productivity, not the estimates, right? So it has like a very kind of inverse effect if that's how it's being treated, especially if there's then imagine that you're a very agile company, very noir, and you have people's bonuses or salaries or like little team performance bonuses tied to that. That's complete madness. Like I was in an organization like that several times. It looked like a good idea on paper, but then tying it to estimates, that's just that was really rough.
You said one specific thing, and that is I'm very honest right now. If you are a CTO, call yourself a CTO, and you are pinned down on an estimate for a period of month, and that's all that there is, then you are, for several reasons, no CTO. You are just,
Founding engineer, probably.
Yeah, you were put into some form of title to have some control over it, but you aren't a leading person. So CTO is a directing person. A directing person needs to be able to orchestrate timelines. That's important.
I see this psychographic a lot with startup CTOs who were founding engineers, and they have become a subject matter expert on the product. So they are basically CTO and CPO, so chief technology and chief product. But they are strategic on the product, but still tactical on engineering, still tactical on, right? So they're a tech lead when technology is concerned, but they are head of product when the product is concerned. And that is a very dangerous mix, because then if you have product discussions, but you're still coding, or you're still too close to how the sausage is made, you will retain the bad habits. And like these root causes of trying to figure out why estimations are being done and how they're being used, that's worth exploring with every organization. I find, unless you have experienced this at your own company or at a previous company, I find every engineer, every organization has to go through this maturity phase of you'll just have to figure out like how are estimates helping. So lean, the traditional lean movement, differentiates pure waste, so things that you can just stop doing because they're nonsense, and I had to look it up to get the right wording. And then there's supposedly necessary waste, right? So that is necessary waste only within a dysfunctional process. If you pull it out, it creates more harm than what you save, because you should be addressing the process, right? So if you have a dysfunctional process and you say, okay, no more estimates, or even worse, just plug a random number generator, just say pi 3.14 for everything, or 1, then that's worse, right? Because now you're playing along in a supposedly necessary process, but you can't really get to the root cause. So that's very important. Like, you need to be able to, you need to figure out what you're avoiding as a CTO and sort of lean into that.
That's the very same problem like with agencies. So people complain that agencies often charge way too high estimates or budgets, right? But you are forced to take it. Why is that? It's because you try to pin them down onto something.
Yeah.
And so they basically need to have some safe space, some runway before, because otherwise they don't get their money, or typical after negotiations, they are always very bad. No one wants
Yeah,
to
you
have
want a
those,
certain
you know?
guarantee. Yeah.
Exactly. So if you don't have a, let's say, a process of trust where you communicate a lot, and you base it on the current progress and on the current challenges and be open about that, then you need those kind of runway buffers, and they are pretty bad for the entire relationship. It will never work out like that long term. You will always have this feeling like, oh, they're tricking me, or they probably, especially when they become or they would be faster, but they artificially slow down the process so they fit the estimate, which is stupid, right? Of course, good for the agency, bad for the actual client, right?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot as well.
Yeah, it is.
How do you prioritize work, right? Like, estimates are usually used in.
So when a client
work
calls me
assignment.
personally at night, then he does have the priority.
So would you do priorities
a
before
joke.
estimates, or estimates after priority? Sorry, or priorities after estimates? How would you?
So
What's recommended? Where's the
I'm-
dysfunction? What to be careful of?
I came from primarily the B2B thing, right? So we are working for other, mostly larger companies than we are ourselves. Enterprises, or let's say mid-plus. There are some smaller as well, some successful smaller ones, but most are in the mid-size plus up to enterprise, or units of enterprises or corporations.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things there is that I lost the point, to be honest.
I asked you priority before estimates or estimates after. You said you're B2B.
So you build for the clients, you build for the stakeholders. You want to solve problems. You want to create solutions. So you need to understand what are the long-term problems they have, and what are the short-term problems they have. And there's a psychological aspect in that. So we delayed gratification is a big problem for us humans. We don't understand that. Most people don't grasp that at all. And there are just some, especially corporations, don't grasp it at all. So no matter what kind of corporation you have there, it is always the person. It's always human. So there's oftentimes a very small team which does have deadlines themselves, those kind of tricky things, and they have some specific problems. And it is always good to keep those small problems in mind, because what you want is you want to build trust. And when you want to have trust, you need to make sure that those people trust you because you have solved them their problems. And if you do the long-term stuff in 18, 20 months from now, maybe, then they don't see those things. So you have 18 months to somehow work with them together until you actually start to solve their problems. What I only can recommend is solve the immediate problems first. And then everyone does have more time and more trust to actually work with you on the long-term projects, on the long-term problems. And that is what I would recommend. So you should focus on the prioritization of your actual of the actual problems of your clients. Maybe a little bit different in the B2C sector, where you are more thinking in MVPs and products and a broader
B2C,
scalable
you mean
SaaS.
that we are building a product for B2C end customers? There still
Yeah,
is
but
a conflict.
it's actually the same. So you need to get
Also,
to
the payment will be some kind of
Yeah.
B2C SaaS. That will be the invoice rather than one large
Yeah.
organization buying engineering power.
Yeah, you can say so. So start to focus on the easy, on the low hanging fruits, as we could say, and solve those kind of problems. See those as low hanging fruits. Tools like we use right now, StreamYard is an example for this. It was starting as a very small package, but it was solving a big issue with streamers who actually weren't able or willing to set up a complex OBS setup or something like that.
Yeah.
So people could start to do something and had those comments in place. It was quite easy. And then they basically extended with new features
The point is
later
that it
on.
works in a browser.
That's a great thing.
That's
Exactly. So
that's
you
the
don't
point.
need to have you
Yeah.
don't need to figure out with bit rates and all those kind of stuff
Yeah.
when you want to do those things. That can be very complicated for the average person, and you need to have you need to understand those immediate problems of people, solve them, and then you get trust, and that trust works like a credit, and when you have this credit, you won't be pinned down onto a deadline or an estimate anymore, because you can actually say, hey, we need more time this time, and they have in mind, yeah, they're trustworthy, I trust them. So when they say, then it's like that, right? So we need to
And we
give
have
them more
something to
time.
show. Like you have leverage to negotiate with because you're doing
That's
continuous
another
delivery.
aspect of continuous delivery. You
Yeah.
always can show even the unfinished product, but it is so just imagine the 3 weeks of work example. You start at day one and you show, or you say one day before you actually should be finished after those 3 weeks, you say we need 1 week more. Then you have 4 weeks of not showing anything, and the people think you're incompetent.
Yeah.
And if you show basically every day a small update, and every week a larger portion of that in the presentation, and then you say you need a week more, then say, okay, we just saw it's great, but we need a week more. It's great, let's do it, right? So this is just basic human psychology behind that. Yeah. You need to learn that. Basic psychology is extremely important for everyone who's an engineering manager, CTO, or tech lead in general.
And I think that's what's really annoying engineers in general, any kind of software engineer, engineering manager. That's where most of the anxiety comes from. It's just being this discussion about being pinned down, the psychology around being pinned down on an estimate, not knowing what the alternatives are. Because one of the biggest challenges with estimates is that they skew the conversation too much to cost. So when you're building a product, even when you're doing B2B, your number one problem is not cost, because your costs are fixed. Like you're not gonna go from 10 people to 100 and then back down to 10 for a project. Like that's not, like, the size of your team will predominantly depend on the size of your organization, not on the project. Unless your project is the organization, if you're a product company, right? So the costs are fixed. So it becomes a question of budget. How much of our fixed costs do we use on the project?
Yeah.
Which implies that there is something else going on in parallel, or it's waiting, or like being kept open, like you're hedging your bets. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And that has to do with prioritization and time estimations. Time estimations only focus on the cost part of the spectrum, right? So most engineers that I talk to, and engineering leaders, I think it always comes to as a surprise when I train tech leads, engineering managers, CTOs in CD3, cost of delay divided by duration, if you need that, right? Duration, that's the time estimate. That comes last, right? So the cost estimation is only needed as a tiebreaker, and only if there's a tie for first place. So imagine your backlog is like a priority, is like a Formula One race. We only need estimates if there's two first places, because we need the estimate on the tiebreak number one versus number two. Which one are we doing first, right? Like that is usually my simplification of how to explain it. But if you don't have that ranking, if your backlog is not prioritized, then that means that everything in the backlog is equal, right? So people will think people, in this case engineers, will think, well, if it's in the backlog, it's important and valuable, and if it wasn't, it wouldn't be in the backlog. So
yeah, that's a good point with the choose the next one. And that's one part of the idea of the monotasking idea as well, to work on the next thing. That is extremely helpful, right? And that's prioritize, or let's say priorities can't change. So the priority of this week's might be another priority of next month. And so you should have the people again inside the same room discussing what is important next, and make it small. So priority is not to get the app done. That's not a priority. You need to have let's say solvable problems in a good amount of time, or in a short amount of time, which could be like, hey, what can we fix tomorrow, or what can we fix at latest this week? That should be a priority, and not what can we maybe do in some month or so. That's important. So keep it short and simple, small batches, continuous delivery. That makes sense in the moment. Hello to Dortmund.
Yeah, hello Ben, hello Tony. Ben was on a Substack live. I just need to spray my throat for a minute. I'll be right back, because my throat is itching and I need to do something about it. Just give me a moment.
So then I take over. So yeah, estimations. For everyone who was joining late, we were talking about the idea of how can you improve estimations, and that estimations shouldn't be a contract, accountability for you as a developer. So every developer, so if you're at a developer level, knows that hey, if we make a estimation, people come to us afterwards and start a blame game. So who was saying that and why are not done? That's right. And those kind of things are very much not cool, let's say. You don't want to have that. And we need to, in order to get that right, we need to close the gap between the people who are on the other side, which are mostly the stakeholders, CEO, the non-tech persons, oftentimes the CTO, because many people or many dev teams don't really know their CTO, because CTO is far away. In smaller companies, CTO can be in the same team. You need to close the gaps. You need to get the people, let's say, the problems you're actually solving, right? Those kind of people who have those problems, they need to be there for you, in the same meeting. Otherwise, you can't bridge the gap, because then you have this contract. But if you sit in the same room, the problems of creating that solution is the problem of not only the developers but the stakeholders as well. So they will adopt that problems. And if you tell them that was more problematic than we thought, estimated, then they say, okay, great, we were in the same meeting, so we feel responsible as well. So what do you need? Instead of, but you told us, it's on paper, you need to do that. No matter what, otherwise we not only blame you, but in worst case scenarios, we sue you, we fire you, or whatever of kind of punishment you will receive otherwise. And the only way to actually get around this is to get the people on the same page. Communicate with them continuously. That's what you need.
And to communicate priorities primarily, right? So, hey, Tony. Tony from Romania. I think Ben is tuning in from Germany, I believe.
Dortmund. From Dortmund, yeah.
So, a lot of engineers, reluctantly, so CTOs primarily, startup CTOs, they ask me, okay, look, but how do I communicate priorities? Because usually we did it with estimates. Like we estimate stuff and then we put it in the backlog, and then we either put it in the sprint or we don't, depending on the estimate. And I tell them, well, the problem is in the question, because that is a push, command and control type of leadership, right? So the psychology is set up to, you won't do anything unless I tell you to, and I don't know how long it takes unless you start working on it and finish. So if you can guess how long it takes to finish work, then I will decide to put you on it or not, right? Because it takes two of us to make this decision. But the solution actually isn't in getting better at this. Getting better at this is just going to drive everybody crazy, because you'll be looking for more precise estimates, and so Don't double down on command and control. What usually helps is a pull structure, right? So you say, these are the priorities, and you bring the teams together, or the team. Let's say there's 5 to 7, or let's say 10 people. 10 people, small organization, CEO, CTO, and admin stuff around the engineering team. Engineering team can be 10 people, 3 backend, 2 frontend, 1 mobile person, 1 QA, 1 DevOps. I think that's like that. I think I just I think that covers like most of our audience. Decide what the top priority is. You don't even need to monotask. I keep reiterating this. Having priorities, knowing what your number one priority is, doesn't mean that you're monotasking. It just means that take your number one priority and then decide what team do you need to make it skill complete to finish that priority. And let's say you need 7 out of the 10 people. Cool. You assign them and then they pull the work. They say, we will do priority number 1. And then the remaining people form a team and say, okay, what's number 2? What's left over? Can we help with number 1? No. Okay. So there isn't a second team that goes to number 1. So the second team goes to number 2. And you keep those teams until number 1 finishes. When number 1 finishes, you disband both teams. It's very important. Because if you don't disband the second team, it will remain busy even though it wasn't on the top priority. And by the time the first team finishes, the number 2 priority might become number 3 or worse. Right? So that's very important. It's very important to just say, hey, most of our people are working on that important stuff. And we've kept it out. Like that's the monotasking unit. We have, 7 out of our 10 people can work on it productively. And maybe 6 would be best. And maybe 2 weeks in, we only need 5. But then everybody else needs to be ready for, okay, like we're doing the lower priority stuff until they're finished and we can have another prioritization call. That's how you would normally do this in like a small startup to scale up transition.
Yeah.
Like below Dunbar number, like what in team topologies would be 1, maybe 2 stream-aligned teams with somebody who understands a complex component and maybe some platform engineering evolving over time. Maybe some DevOps capability, maybe deployment capability, maybe platform integration capability, right? And the issue is most technical leaders don't know how to prioritize. So I teach them CD3. It's simple, it fits on a screen, and it can be easily gamified, right? It's basically putting a 3-axis matrix on the screen. So you do urgency, you do value, and you do duration. That's CD3, right? So you say, we can't start everything. If we start on number 1, then until number 1 is done, number 2 is waiting. What's the cost of number 2 waiting? Right? And we derive the cost from value. Like how much value, what is our opportunity cost in value? Not what is the budget deficit in fixed costs, right? So it's not about COGS, right? It's not about it's not about how much salaries the engineers take, but the value that the feature provides. If we're not prioritizing it, then we're delaying the value.
Yeah.
What is that difference in money? And that's what a lot of people struggle with, because if they don't put a number on it, then implicitly the number is 0. And then all of your tasks are 0 in value. And then you just estimate by time, right? By labor cost and urgency. But then you only end up doing the really urgent stuff that is small. And that's a sort of nail on the coffin for most product companies, because you can't, you're constantly just in firefighting mode. Right, so the root cause is generally not having a value discussion with stakeholders. Why is this valuable?
True.
Right, so if you're telling me this is valuable and we start working on it, value means that you won't interrupt me, because there isn't anything more valuable than this. Right, so when you want a new feature, you won't interrupt me 2 days in with some compliance stuff, because you need to decide which one is more valuable. Like, so that we're not multitasking, right? So the whole point is to avoid multitasking. The whole point is to avoid even estimating cost, because estimating cost also comes with time investment. It takes time to break a project down and estimate, sort of guess how long it will take. And the estimation of cost for the time investment, what is normally an estimate, it is a proxy metric for organizational dysfunction, right? So if you need it, and if you need them to be precise, and if you need a lot of them, and if you need them all the time, and kept relatively fresh in like accuracy or recency, then that is an organizational dysfunction. That means that there are 7 or like everything you're estimating is competing ex aequo for the top spot in priorities, right? Which means you don't have one priority. It means you have 7 priorities. And
what is the consequence? What is the consequence of doing that long term?
The consequence of doing that long term? That's a good question. Let me think about that for a moment. So the consequences short term are, I hope, clear. Like they don't actually move the needle. Long term, what can happen is that you might get stuck, never building anything of value, right? Because I can tell you, I need a car, and you tell me, well, that's expensive. But I can give you bananas. That's cheap, right? So if these two concepts are equal in value, or if the value is 0, and this is how I make my decisions, long term, I'm just hoarding cheap stuff that I don't need. So bring this analogy to software engineering, the long-term consequence is that you risk creating a feature factory, right? So you're creating an organization that has to be pushed, command and controlled, with certain divide and conquer principles, where everybody is constantly hunting for some kind of low-hanging fruit, right? And then we're just hoarding features, just hoarding quick wins. Such a product organization might have on paper, good agile velocity or Jira velocity for tickets, like for ticket churn, or a good Kanban throughput, but their
burn down
velocity might be 0, right? Because they're not actually creating anything of value to the end customers. That's the risk.
That is actually the same. The problem why we are so prone to that is that we are used to that in modern real life. So the fallacy of buying way too many cheap things instead of saving for some more important, larger things is a big problem in modern society. So people don't think long term anymore because long term is complicated, and delayed gratification doesn't really work.
And we have this in real life, right? This is the typical: should I buy a car, buy a new car, or buy a used car, or lease a car? Should I buy a home? Should I buy a home with cash? Should I buy a home with a mortgage, or should I rent? This is the exactly same problem, right? But we need to do a value and cost analysis and opportunity cost analysis, right? So, but the value and the opportunity cost dominate the decision-making space, not the actual cost. The cost is by far, if this is a large purchase, is already budgeted. You can't spend more than you have, right?
Well, that is then with more mortgages and loans and some of those kind of things.
Well, yeah, but that's
the
also
thing we do in a society.
But that's just a bank deciding how much you can have. There's a limit to that as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, and you can't spend more than that. And it's the same with engineering teams, right? Like you can't spend more than you have. So the whole cost analysis is just trying to decide, okay, are we doing one thing, or are we going all in on priority number 2, and we have some leftover capacity we go all in on priority number 1, and we have some leftover capacity for priority number 2 until 1 finishes, or until 1 becomes impossible, and then it was good that we started number 2 early. Like that is also like a good outcome. People constantly ask me, hey, we prioritized the sprint, and it's Wednesday, and now somebody wants to put something into the sprint. And usually engineers like to think, no, the sprint is holy, no changes. But I would always say, no, like it's possible you got the sprint wrong, right? Like it's possible you didn't do value analysis, you only did cost analysis, And now 2 days in, the thing that was actually the priority, the person who cares, the main stakeholder, is seeing that it's not moving forward, and they try to interrupt you to get your attention to move it forward. Or it might be technical debt related, right? So we said we will address technical debt, but then didn't. It's like, we already did this mistake last week, and it caused our estimates to be, right? And it's just the same conversation. It was very important. I always teach leaders, in these 3 formats. Number 1, what are your priorities? Right? When you're estimating cost, make sure value is estimated as well. If you don't have priorities for value, then I teach them CD3. If they do have priorities and value, then I teach them how to go from a push command and control team to a pull team, right? Where the team says, let's disband the teams, let's bring them together, and then let's decide how many people are needed to make a skill complete team that can tackle the top priority. And let's make that normal.
What I would like to add is when I sit down with a client, so just based on what you just said. So when I sit down with a team, and developers are there as well, and we discuss things, there are several things the clients want to have solved first. And then we basically get to the point that we start those things, and there is so much discussed. But let's say after 2 or 3 months, we realize that many of the smaller things are that irrelevant, or became that irrelevant, that they even say, okay, we can actually turn that off. That was a bad idea.
Yeah.
And that's one of those important aspects as well. Sometimes you estimate things and you'll make a low priority, so you fill your backlog with something you will never do because it is actually not that important. And that's what I meant with you need to do the small things, not the small things, but let's say the priorities which needs to be done right now, where you need those things where most value is in, right? So where you actually can change something. That's what
I'm glad you mentioned this, because this is one of the primary reasons why I teach CD3 over everything else. Like I don't do planning poker. I don't do business analysis with the stakeholders. Yes, for an enterprise, yes, but for just engineering work, like what's the point? Because CD3 has 2 axes of opportunity cost, value and urgency. And a lot of people get urgency wrong. Urgency is usually attributed to like the hippo, right? So the highest income person in the room, or what is the hip? What's the acronym? It is highest paid person's opinion. Yes, thank you, Google. That's usually what people think. No, this is really important. This is really important. But I like CD3's definition of urgency. So urgency is volatility of value. So the thing that actually is a deadline, right? So things are urgent if their value has a shelf life, a short shelf life.
So is CD3 conceptual design, detailed design, develop?
No, it's cost of delay.
Okay, cool. I don't know that. I can't find that. Do you have any information about that?
Yeah, I think Jordan Cutler had a great.
The first thing I found was some kind of protein thing, and I thought to myself, it's probably not a protein thing.
Yeah. So I like to refer to Jordan. Why is it Jordan Cutler? John Cutler?
Is he still active?
Which one is it? I think it's John Cutler. Wait, hang on. Let me get the Cutler straight.
Because Jordan Cutler became inactive quite a while ago.
Yeah. I keep linking this to my students and mentees. Let me bring it up. I'll find it. Anyway, the main aspect of CD3 is that it puts urgency on the axis, and the urgency means volatility of value, right? So that means that we need to build something and building it now is valuable. Building it in August will not be valuable. That has higher urgency than something that can be built whenever. Right? So something that is always valuable to build is not urgent.
Mhm.
Now, it might be really important. It might be really valuable, more valuable than anything else. But because its value is constant, or even increasing in value over time, you want to keep the optionality of building it as late as possible.
Yeah.
Right? To defer a decision as late as possible in favor of things that are high value, where the value is volatile. Black Friday is a good example. It's really valuable to get something done before Black Friday, and then the value quickly diminishes after Black Friday. Right? So the urgency axis, I think, throws a lot of business owners off because they don't know how to they don't know how to conceptualize it. And I always give them that article. Let me find it real quick because now I'm just referring to it. I see. I searched incorrectly. I have a personal Slack for my mentees for my coaching, and it is one of my most linked links. But I can't find it right now.
The highest paid person opinion.
That's the hippo. Yes. I'll find it.
That is so in hospitals that are so common. What you see the doctors, right? They basically follow the
Okay,
opinion of the highest person in the room.
It's John Cutler. It's the Substack called Cuttlefish. Let me link it in LinkedIn. This is one of my. I think I shared this post more than any other post. My mentees. It's good reading, and it's worth reading much more than a book. If you get the prioritization right, because it has great examples of what is urgent and what is not urgent, right? So, first mover's advantage, market competition, a regulatory deadline or a contractual obligation, a trend, things like Black Friday, something that has compounding costs, that is urgent because the value is volatile.
Yeah.
Then things that are less urgent are things that are evergreen, things that we can do whenever, right? That's not urgent. It might be very valuable, so you might want to start working on it ASAP. But if it doesn't have a shelf life in value, the value doesn't diminish over time, then it does not compete in urgency. It will compete in value, right? And it will compete in cost to deliver if we can estimate that. But you only need to estimate that if there's a tie for first place, right? If there's a tie for the first priority, and you can't decide between A or B which one to do first. And even if there is a problem, if the cost of estimation is high or unknown, then it might just be better to start with A or B.
But for developers, it's quite often very difficult to grasp what is important and what's not.
No, this is not for developers. So this is for CTOs who need to sit down with their counterparties, stakeholders, CPO, CEO, and have a value conversation before they even entertain getting the engineers into the room. Right? So they need to be on the same page about what the company finds valuable, where the company wants to be perceived as a first mover, where the moat is. What is the guaranteed competitive advantage of this business? How is this business different? What differentiates it? Right? So that is one of the first things. And John had this great graphic on his blog, on the Substack post, where he basically puts the three axes of CD3 onto a two-dimensional plane, because otherwise it's a cube. And he basically did x-axis, y-axis, and split and colors, right? So then everything that is green you would consider for priority number one, and usually it's top right is green. right? So things that are urgent and valuable, with a bias to lower value and high urgency on the right, and a bias towards no urgency and very high value on the top, and then obviously the something's on fire on the top right. But generally, the things that are bottom left, you never touch. You don't estimate them. You don't estimate stuff that is either evergreen or not urgent, or always of low value. Like, you would never estimate that, because it is pointless to estimate it, because if you start working on it, somebody will come and interrupt you, right? Like, it's boring to just follow a sprint backlog. And let's say it's tax season, and somebody requested some kind of tax automation for your product, and it's only urgent in that month when it's tax season, right? Because that year it can help them not do it again manually. But after it's gone, the urgency goes away, and right. So if it's in the backlog as a low priority in general throughout the year, and the engineers are just falling into the backlog, they'll be disillusioned that, hey, why is everybody trying to interrupt me to do this tax feature? But we always say it's not a priority and I'm busy. That's because the prioritization of value, of opportunity cost, of delaying something is never discussed. They're just having discussions about cost. And which is also silly, because the costs are static, right? If you have a team of 10, the cost is team of 10, right? Like, like the project doesn't magically cost more, because unless you're hiring people, it's not gonna it's not gonna be done sooner if you don't prioritize it. Now, a lot of engineers leaders that I talk to, they also struggle with not knowing how to put several people on the top priority. There's my kids in the background. But maybe we can talk about that some other time. I think we had a very exhaustive discussion about estimation. So to recap, be very careful when you're estimating just cost, right? In absence of value. Try to determine the root cause of why you're being pinned, if you're being pinned down on estimates, why that is. Try to determine what the alternatives are. Like, why am I estimating this? Like, what are we choosing between? Is the stuff I'm estimating prioritized? Because then I would prefer only prioritizing if there's a tiebreaker needed at the top, right? So that you're better equipped at having this conversation. And also, when somebody is trying to reprioritize you actively, take it seriously. Don't treat your sprint backlog or your contract as a contract, your legal contract as a contract. Those documents are lagging documents of commitment, right? You would generally say, no, we learned something new, we need to pivot, get our legal team on putting an amendment onto the contract to make sure we're still that this is still kosher. That's how you would deal with it, right? If you're in a serious product organization, it's like, hey, we found something new. We talked with the client, yes, but we didn't formalize it, so now we're in breach of contract. Like, we need to formalize the deal, otherwise, they're paying us for the feature that we determined is not worth building. They said that's correct, and now we're sort of pivoting and to sort of spend the budget more industriously. So those are all lagging indicators. Like, you should, again, within reason, you should treat those as lagging problems that can be addressed rather than treating them as contracts. If somebody's coming to interrupt you with a higher priority, you made a mistake in the prioritization meeting. Or you need to challenge them. Hey, is this more important than what I'm working on? Should I abort what I'm working on?
I have just 5 more minutes, just saying.
It's 5 o'clock, so we can stop here.
Okay, so I think that was an interesting session. And I think people can take a lot, actually a lot from it, because I think it comes down to one point. For me, it actually does. So, everyone is working differently, but for me, it comes down to communication. So estimation is a communication problem. It is not estimating something and then have a problem when it's not working, because we are in a space where you can't really estimate something over a longer period of time. Things will change. Things will change before you actually get to the finish line, even if you are in time. So you need to take that into consideration. And for small to medium-sized businesses and startups, even scale-ups, I still recommend, especially in the B2B area, I recommend to get everyone involved into those kind of meetings and have them very regularly. And when you are in the B2C space, make sure you solve the right problems early on and focus on those. That is what I would do in order to stay fluent, to stay in a good cash flow as well, to actually keep that stuff up. That's something you should have as well. So if you estimate too many things into the future, you can run even into financial problems if you do that wrong, right? And you need to know very early on when you run into problems, and you should be, let's say, flexible to get out of there and maybe make some adjustments. Well, actually, I need to go now, but thank you for that session. Next week, what's the topic next week?
Well, you're doing your stream next week, but I'm not
That's
sure
on
how you
Tuesday.
timed it.
That's
That's on Tuesday.
Tuesday. That is not on Wednesday. Wait a second.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, we have something different. La 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 la. Where is it? We have modern front end. So we're talking about modern front end, another very good topic next week.
If you manage to have your stream on Tuesday, you are setting up a modern front end project, I believe, a full stack project on Tuesday, right?
Probably we'll take Cloudbar for that, but it is a modern front end.
Can we recap that on Wednesday?
Yeah, of course.
I think that would be a good idea.
So I would focus then on the front end tech stack, because we don't build something on Tuesday. We basically prepare and deploy these kind of things, and take a look how a PaaS platform does work. It is a precursor for a bigger topic I'm writing right now. It will be released on Sunday, where we talk about, that was an interesting topic we had that with clients. I saw that on Substack is Europe actually capable of having its own infrastructure when you wouldn't have any public
clouds without Microsoft
anymore.
and AWS?
Exactly. So there are three, let's say, major circumstances which could lead to a problematic relationship, like political, like economical, or like regulatory things,
or just tariffs if they make it more expensive.
Maybe, exactly. And is Europe actually prepared for this? And I've prepared an article, and we have this month the CloudFest. I will go there. I will do a lot of interviews locally there with cloud providers in Europe, primarily Germany and France, I think, will be there. And we will talk about that specifically. So what is actually, or what are the Europeans actually doing in order to keep up and provide things? And that will be an interesting thing as well. And on Sunday, I will post about that, initial thought. And then we go, I think it's in the second half of March is the CloudFest. I forgot the dates, to be honest, but we will be there. I will make live streaming from there as well. I took a look. Probably Substack, maybe Twitch as well. Let's take a look. And then on Tuesday, one of the topics is what you can actually do today with those platform as a service solutions, and of course taking a look which type of solutions we have there. So that is actually an interesting topic, I think. And then on Wednesday, we can go primarily on taking a look how a modern tech stack is working in a front-end area, and what the caveats are. So Next.js versus Vite. So React, why we actually chose React, and why would I choose React again, right? How do you actually use React correctly? That's one of those points where we should discuss as well, because I think so many people are actually doing that wrong. Yeah, and there are other things
or just following outdated advice.
So much in React space is outdated.
Or influencer hype.
And
I think it's a combination of the two.
Because most developers in the React space aren't in production. That's one of the big things we have as a big problem. Most train with React, most are in boot camps with React, or those kind of things. But we have so less people doing really heavy production workloads on React. And those who do are actually happy with that. And those who try to get there are unhappy, and we can basically react on that. I hear the Rauschmeißer Musik. So
You said you only had 5 minutes.
I know. It's getting louder even, right? Someone is pushing me out of here. Okay, man. Then
keep something for Wednesday. It's gonna be fun. So next Wednesday,
will we do next Wednesday? Will we do already Twitch and YouTube only thing?
Yeah, I think we should try it. Yeah.
Okay.
We can see how it goes for you on Tuesday. Tuesday you're streaming on the setup. Wednesday we can discuss modern front end.
So for everyone who's listening right now in LinkedIn, you won't be able, starting from next week, even though he's making the music louder and louder, I will be louder than the music. No, you won't be able to listen on LinkedIn to us anymore.
Yeah.
We will do on Twitch and YouTube live only. So we will provide you some information. So pick either of those two. Because LinkedIn turned out, especially when you have more than 10 people, it simply breaks. It doesn't really work.
Chat breaks and
Exactly. And we want to basically put that one step ahead, one step further, and let's take a look how that actually works out. And see you next week, everyone. Have a nice one. Bye-bye.
Ciao.